Hi everyone, and welcome to this September review video for Painters Motivating Painters. If you're not familiar to the channel, it's part of a Facebook group where it's a lot of really great people who get together and help each other out with tips on how to improve in miniature painting in particular. And if you're interested in that, you're free to join on Facebook and then submit any pictures you want of your finished works into next month's review. This is our second one with me in America, so hopefully there's no like cutouts in the internet, and we've got a lot of really great miniatures to review. So we're just gonna get straight into it. First we have Max Palmberg doing some Corn Berserker guys looking for a decent tabletop standard. Well, Max, you're there. These are definitely decent tabletops. They will look good on the table. I think you're getting a lot of mileage out of kind of weathering and the blood splatter and things, adding a lot of interest to them, and as well it being a very good color scheme. The way you've got kind of orangey yellow armor, and then the blue bases that contrast with each other, and then just the silver like edge highlighting, or not edge highlighting, edging on all the armor to kind of give them again a bit more definition and things. So yeah, definitely, you were very sensible in the way you kind of attacked this for a tabletop sort of squad or what have you, or an army. So I just have a few notes of things that you could improve if you wanted to. I think the bases, they're nice, but they could have a bit more variety to them, and they're very blue. So you might want to try some more like gray, like blue grays in there. So like French Mirage Blue from Vallejo, I don't know what they call it now. That's a great color for ice because it's just a very cold gray. And also Payne's Gray for washes, just to kind of like add some definition. Because the bases don't look quite as well like shaded, I guess, as the Marines themselves, and they're quite bright, relatively speaking. As well as that, you might want to, I don't know if you've done an oil wash on these, but some of the backpacks, they have those like holes and things in them, and an oil wash would go straight in there and just fill it all in for you and do it really, really nice. Marco Frazzoni is a great guy for checking out like doing this kind of speed painting thing where he kind of does all the base coats and then uses various tricks to get all the definition and interest fairly quickly. And as well, you might want to do the skulls. Like the skulls are in the kind of orange color, the ones that are like part of their backpacks. But you could do them like in a different base color and then shade it the same way, and that would just, because if you look, obviously it's for tabletop, so it's like how close are people going to look at these? I think skulls look fine, they're shaded nicely. But if you look closely, you're like, well, they're the same color as the armor, which is a little bit odd. And yeah, I think they're like really good for tabletop. So good job and keep it up, Jim.
Yeah, much the same. These look great for the tabletop, Max. Excuse me. Yeah, I think if there was one thing you could do to push it a bit further, it would be separation, as Matt said. So an oil wash, or even just a standard acrylic wash, I think would really help it. So they've got a nice finish on them. It's not like sheeny or satiny. So whatever you've used like to finish them has worked really well. And the other big thing that's ticking me is the base rims. So I think the bases look okay. As Matt said, yeah, you could knock this bright blue back a little bit. But for me, it's just the rims themselves. They're really, really messy. So make sure after you've done all your textures and effects and stuff on the base, you sand that all right back, and then make a nice tidy base rims. It will improve them no end just by doing that. So yeah, I hope that helps, Max. Thank you very much. Really looking good though overall. So nice one, Max. Okay, moving up to Adam, who says this is his firstly highly involved conversion, Lord of Blights. So he's planning on submitting a piece to the competition in December. So wondering what your opinion is now, what tweaks I can make for the submission. So yeah, really, really great overall, I think. Love the contrast on this. Great tones that you've got pretty much everywhere. The use of like a universal highlight color that's on like the skin and on the stones and on the wings as well is really, really cool. So the wing texture I thought looks really cool. I'm not sure how you've done this, possibly with crackle paints and pigments and stuff like that. Looks really awesome. But it does look a little bit dull compared to the rest of it. So going back in and picking out some details and some textures with a highlight color would be cool. A wise man once said, if you've highlighted everything, you've highlighted nothing. And that's true, but I think this needs a little bit more highlighting. You've brought the attention really, really nicely to the figure by having him the absolute brightest. So I wouldn't go this bright, but I think even if it was just like a really, really light dry brush, just to pick some bits out, build it up very gradually. I think that would really, really help. So then I got that you could do with some more tones in the flesh shadow areas. So where it goes down into like folds and stuff, you could use some like magentas or some purples in here. This is all just a bit like monochromatically shadowed. And it's good contrast. I just think you need a little glaze of a little hue in there just to bring some more life to the skin. Then this red angry bit was quite very red and angry, and it's kind of gone into the pink a little bit. So you might want to bring that more back to red, perhaps, to help that sell a little better. And obviously these are open wounds as well, so they could do with a little bit of the same, like of this pinky red hue that's around the edge of it. But really, really nice work what you've done on the metals, like the texture and the damage and the weathering of the metals is all really cool. So that's very strong. I thought maybe you could push the highlight on the helm just a little bit more. These like horn bits are highlighted way more than this green bit, and it didn't really, even if it was just a very slight one, just to sort of connect these two highlights together, like the line of attention would be really, really strong. And then I think finally an extreme highlight on the skin. It's got a very wide, broad sort of general highlight to it. So just picking out some really, really high bits, like with an extreme highlight color, would be really, really good as well, just to push it that little bit further on the skin. But generally, like, great work on the base. This blue pipe tentacly thing as well looks really sweet. So I'm really enjoying that. Weathering on the blade looks awesome. Really, really selling there. So yeah, there's an awful lot going right with it, mate. So I hope that that helps you a bit. Matt, over to you.
Yeah, it's a really, really cool piece. Like, really interesting paint job, and the conversion is pretty much like flawless, more or less. I can't see you can like use a few bits that you cut off. Like, the guy himself is converted. He has different arms and things, which you wouldn't even think of initially. And it's cool the way you have the contrast between like the angel wings and this crusty old Nurgle guy. Yeah, I totally agree with what Jim said about the helm. Like, even if you had like a bright highlight for his eye, like a dot in there and then something in the middle, just to show that the helmet is like a metallic surface, and you want to have, because he doesn't have a face, you want to have like the equivalent of like the light in his eyes. And the maggots I thought were very saturated yellow, and they're kind of all the same level, if that makes sense. Even though his belly kind of like wraps around, so the bottom one should probably be more shadowed. That's very eye catching. And as well, it might be a bit like the base is really nice, and it might be a bit late in the process for this, but you got a lot of the wings look like they fade out to like shadow as you move away from the piece, but the base, like the tentacle and the stairs and all, doesn't. So it means that your attention is drawn more down. So you could just like use like airbrush glazes or whatever to create that like vignette effect where the stairs like drop off in shadow as well. And if you feel like you want to alter the composition. But yeah, it's an extremely well painted piece, and it looks really good, and it's quite original as well. So I think you've got a good chance in whatever the competition you're putting in for, and we wish you the best of luck. Next one up is Simon Isley painting this Stormcast person. I'm assuming you want to talk about the NMM because I put it in the main group. So as I said there, Spear looks great. I really love how you've got like purples and blues and greens and stuff integrated into the NMM, which makes it look much better. And those like star bursts of light. I think the gold is not as strong, especially in the kind of armor. Just kind of probably got enough of a run in terms of your shadow to your highlight colors. You could maybe have more of an edge highlight in places, but it's more to do with the kind of way you picked out volumes and the direction of the light. It kind of looks more like it's not really clear where the light's coming from in different pieces. Like the shield is extremely well lit, as if the light's coming in from that direction, but then his head looks like it's lit in the other direction. So it is tricky when you have a guy like this because he's all in arm and it's all kind of gold. So one thing you could do if you're working on NMM in the future is you consider going, I don't want it all to be gold. So you could scrape off like the insignia on the shield, or just pretend and then freehand something there instead, or even just pretend like the shield is painted blue, and that'll give you a lot more room to focus on like the kind of formed pieces like the breastplate and the helm. But even if you were to just add like a nice highlight along, like an edge highlight along the halo bit, and then like in the eyes having like an ultimate kind of highlight on all those edges to bring it out, that would make it much more metallic looking, as opposed to being working like yellowy. Also look out for stuff like rivets, because they're like spheres, so you have to highlight them like spheres. They look really good if you have a strong shadow under them and like a dot highlight on them. And you want to make sure that like, if you have a rivet that's in a shadow area, it's not highlighted the same way. Whereas you kind of got that going on. The bottom of the shield is very bright, even though it's facing like directly at the ground. Whereas like then his abs are not, they're really dark. And that kind of is breaking the illusion for us, because with NMM, a lot of the time it kind of all has to work for any of it to work. I think the spear is totally selling as its own thing there, but when you look at his armor, it's just a bit confusing as to where light is getting at him from. But great work in terms of like progressing your NMM, and like even just doing the spear as like a bite-sized chunk is a great exercise altogether. And it's nice to have a little bit of freehand like that liking you've got on his shoulder and stuff. So fair play, Jim.
Yeah, really great go at NMM. I think to make it like look shinier though, you could do with brighter, starker highlights on it. They're quite suffused. The whole thing looks quite desaturated as well. It might be like the photo of the light. But yeah, as Matt said, some of the placement is a bit of a challenge. I mean, these things are hard to paint all in NMM anyway. But yeah, just a bit more contrast, so deeper shadows, higher highlights, and make them sort of starker as well, I think would really help. But that blade is just stunning. That's really an overwhelming success on this piece. And I just generally love the way you've incorporated so many colours into it, and they're all complementary to each other, like the greens, blues, purples, like in the male down on the ground. You've even got some purple like as a drop shadow underneath him, and I think that's all working really well. So yeah, just a matter of glazes and shades on the armor just to push it that next level up. Cheers, Simon. Hope that helps. Okay, moving up to Kelvin. So he's after overall feedback on the whole piece, mostly focusing on the base and its ability to tie the whole diorama. This was originally 2 individuals that had nothing to do with each other. Then he wanted to combine them together with a base. So tried painting the base in a way that would incorporate colours from both minis in an attempt to bring everything into the same world without bringing too much attention away from the minis. Something's missing, can't put a finger on it, like some feedback. Okay, so very nicely painted, I have to say. Great use of colours, good contrast. It's very smooth as well, especially like the sword on the is he this little verminy guy? I don't know. Don't recognise him. He reminds me a little bit of Splinter for some reason. This kind of like kung fu rat type thing, with a smashing moustache. But yeah, like we can really see like the scale of this, how small this is, and it's really very well painted, beautifully well defined, amazing gamut that you've used, run of colours, like even down to like the tones you've used on the cork is all really, really nice. So that's all very strong. So is Spidey. I think the issue is there's too much negative space on the base. So either base is too big or models are too far apart from each other. So easy fix would be to obviously reposition the spider. He's also not sitting particularly well on the rubble. I know it, that as they move, legs are out of, they're not sort of in contact with the ground when he's moving, but the model excuse me, itself isn't. He's not like sculpted in a way where one of his legs is deliberately lifted higher than the others as he's walking. He's in a static pose, so it kind of looks like he should have all of his legs, apart from perhaps the front two, in contact with something, which might be one of the reasons that it's not quite resolving properly. You see what I mean? All of his legs are the same height, so he's not like clearly lifting something higher to get over anything. So just either adding some more bits to like fill up underneath his legs would be cool, or just changing his position slightly on the base, because this huge empty area in the middle is it's not really necessary. I don't think. I do think they could be closer together, but I think his positioning is actually quite nice, just off center on this motif that's on the floor. And then the other thing that kind of caught my eye, and I don't know if it's an issue really, but just looks a bit weird. But if a stone pillar falls, wouldn't it break or crack in some way? Everything else has, and this one's just kind of like fallen, but has taken no like significant damage. So that was a bit like, okay, maybe an opportunity there just to bust this up a bit. It might be a nice opportunity as well to sort of fill the spaces between their legs as well, if you wanted to really take it that far. But on the whole, really, really nice work, even down to like the little details like the detritus and the leaves and stuff that's on the floor. Great tones in the stone, like clearly not grey. So, yeah, really nice work overall, Kelvin. Thank you very much. Matt?
Yeah, I really agree. It's like painting is great, facing is great, and then there's just something about the way the figures go together that is a little bit off, as you said. I think it's because um, like it's an oval base, which means that we don't really have any direction in particular that we want to be looking at it from, and you can tell because you took like 55 photos of it from like every angle, um, because it's like symmetrical. So it's like, do you want to see it from the side of them or from the opposite side, or like one of the front or one of the back? And they're both facing in towards each other, so there's no real angle where you can see both of their faces at all. Um, so I think one of the things, like Jim said, like if there was less negative space, you could like if you had some verticality in here as well, it would do a lot of work. Like if the guy was there and the spider's kind of crawling down a wall or a raised area towards him, and you then shrink them closer together, or in reverse where you have your little doggy rat warrior guy and he's standing on top of a hill waiting for this thing to come at him. Because again, they still don't, because they're just flat to each other. There's not really much context. You're like, the monster is obviously attacking him, but he's just kind of standing there casually waiting. And you're like, why does he feel like this is where he wants to fight the thing, as opposed to like being in an advantageous position or whatever? Or if he had his back to the wall, like if you put a lot of like clicky stuff in behind him, you get this idea that he's like making a stand there. But yeah, I think it's just because it kind of looks like two minis on a base, if that makes sense. Whereas in a diorama, you kind of want it to be more a scene from a film where it's like framed in a particular way, and the oval base is kind of throwing things off because it's too symmetrical. If that makes sense. But it's a great looking piece overall. I'd love to see more from it in the future. They're very nicely painted figures and very nice bit of terrain as well. Next up, we have Sulin Daniel Luke. Sorry for butchering your name. Doing some Terminator Captain guy with a stepping on an alien face, trying to improve on reworking it other than improving NMNs and lighting. So okay, cool. No, that's the wrong page. Yeah, it's really cool. I love the colors that you've used. The way you've got this, like, I really like the purple armor, and the way you've got like a lot of blue OSL, and then he's kind of got gold and orange for the Tyranid down there. I think it's very technically very well painted. Like you've got like really well placed like lights and shadows, very high contrast in the NMM, which looks good. And freehand, it's super tidy as well, so it's extremely cleanly painted. And I love the cape, the way it's like got this so shiny and glossy looking. It looks like it's some space material like that, like mylar that they make like the coat spaceships with. It's really really cool. So like that's great work on the texture, as you said. So kind of a few nitpicky things because, as I said, I think it's really well painted. I think it might be nice if you have the OSL kind of his helmet's lit from beneath, which is again a classic sci-fi trope. That makes no sense. You wouldn't want that because you couldn't see, but it looks good on film. It looks good on miniatures. But it might be nice to have like the ring of lights and then a shadow directly under his chin, like as if it's not, because it looks kind of like he's lit like all the way under here, which is a bit weird. And then there'd be a bit better. He'd have like light to dark and then light again for his skin. I think that might be a little bit of improvement there. And then I thought that the OSL on the foot, like the red OSL, on particularly on his left leg, is a bit too heavy in terms of how it's affecting the color. Like if you look just at that picture where it's from his left side, it looks like he has one red leg as opposed to like I was like, is his greaves and his boot on that side red? Is it like that kind of color scheme? But it's obviously it's meant to be gold, and then the red light is changing it to be red. But it wouldn't be quite the same as that because it looks too much like he's got a blood angel like foot on him. And especially, I think one of the reasons is you have the top of his foot illuminated in red, which doesn't make any sense because you're showing us the light sources coming from beneath. Like if it was just like the way you've done his shoulder pad is like probably the best bit for me is left shoulder where you have a main highlight where it's kind of going up to a warmer purple from the main light, and then you have like a line of that kind of mid-tone highlight, and then you have the orangey red one coming from below. Whereas on his left foot, you have kind of like too much bits on the top as well, and too much of it is red, if that makes sense. We could get into like how red would it be given that it's gold, but I think if you just had the top of his foot was gold the whole way around, and then you just tone back the air, having tone back the area that is going up to a pure red on his leg, that would be a big improvement. But these are all very small pieces that he's extremely well painted, and you should be very, very happy with them. Oh, and also I love the slime coming out of the tears of his mouth and then like dripping in the base. It's super cool the way you've like made it have like that transparency effect and the little highlights on it for such a small detail. It's great. Jim?
Yeah, just to expand on that OSL thing, because that was the main thing for me. Like this part of the leg armor here, this like joint node thing, that's perfect how you've executed it there. How you've got the gold and it's well highlighted, then the deep shadow, then into red. You need to do the same thing on the feet, basically. So it'd be gold here, then it go to shadow, then it go to red, and then to shadow again. So Matt's absolutely spot on with that. This version just here on this like wrist cuff thing is also really nice. So yeah, just emulate what you've done on the bits that work. But yeah, for sure, the red leg is too strong. Again, wonderful work on the cape. The sword stippling is super cool. Even like this effect that you've done on the husk of the gun is really nice. Freehand, delicious on the armor plates on his chest. Yeah, I don't have a lot of criticism after what Matt's just said, to be honest. Beautifully well separated. Lovely scheme all round. Attention right where you want it. It's super. The only thing I thought maybe was that the cape, it looks like tin foil or whatever, space foil. But it does look hyper clean, considering that they've like sculpted in nicks, scratches, holes. So maybe even if it was just on like this lower portion, just grubbing it up a little bit, I think would perhaps make it sell a little bit better. I've always just thought that about if they've sculpted damage on it, then it's an old cape. Do you know what I mean? So I personally just think it looks a little bit too clean. As amazing as it is, in this instance, I think you could stand to weather the bottom of the cape a little bit. But that's pretty much it. So yeah, awesome work. Thank you very much. Come again and bring your friends. All right, next is Stephen Banks. This is a piece that's been in my pile of shame for a long time. I tried to focus on the skin to give texture with stippling and glazing, colour variation with strong vibrancy. How does this play? Any other comments? Yeah, so first thoughts initially are striking. Good green flesh, methinks. However, a bit shiny in a lot of places. So matting it down straight away would be the first thing I do, like first step. You can see it on the horns, taking away the contrast. Like that's going to dark. It's a lovely fade. It's a lovely blend. and the finish of the paint that you've used is just spoiling it. Same within like deep recesses here, like you're getting these reflections where you want it to be dark. It's actually the brightest thing on the model in the deepest shadow. So straight away, stuff like that just tricks you, and that's not just in pictures either. That's when it's in your hand as well. So matte this bad boy down would be my first piece of advice. Then with the skin, I think you've done a really good job. You could just push it further into like a yellowy green hue for the highlights. There's a little bit there, but go further, and like the texture that you've got from the stippling is working really, really well. So that's great. Then I thought what you've done with the horns would be really, really cool to do on his hooves as well, because those look a little bit flat, to be honest. So just having either a transition or just some striations or just some other variation on the hooves would be really, really cool. I do like what you've done with this banner at the back here, that red. Oops, one too far. So that red's looking really, really good. Those volumes are nice. The highlights are cool. Red's tricky to like get decent contrast into. So nice job there. Then there's a picture of the rider. So the rider was cool, but these the flesh, I think you've kind of highlighted it in reverse. So it would kind of be the highlight would need to be like closer to the top on skin. Traditionally, shall we say? There will be a bit of shadow in here, but generally it would be darker down here, and then as it gets to the top of the volume, it gets brighter, and that would meet like the darkest part of the fold above it, as it were. So that was just a little bit flippy there, but I like the tones and stuff that you've used. And I wasn't sure if those are supposed to be fiery horns. They kind of look a bit fiery. If you're going for fiery, cool, almost there, just a little bit more red towards the tips. I think would sell. If it's supposed to be bone, then ignore everything I just said. The haft of this weapon could do with a little bit more detail. Like you've got awesome separation on the ropes and stuff, but then there's some sculpted details that are on the actual wood that haven't got the same level of contrast. So deepening some of that and brightening the highlights would also really, really help. I think. Did I have anything else? Once again, apparently, I have been triggered by the base rim. Let's find a picture. Oh, yes, this. Yes. Please tidy the base rim. I think you could also get away with some more stuff on the base as well, especially around the back. There's not much going on there. So, yeah. Let's try and get a picture of the front, see what's going on there. Yeah, maybe some tufts or lump of wood, or like some, even some more of this pool, like this nasty green pooling that's going on would be nice. Yeah, just a little bit, but for sure tidy up the base room, dude. All right, thanks, Stephen. Matt?
Yeah, it's really good. I really love the way you've done skin with that bright green and the kind of orange yellow pustules. Reminds me of that scene in Gremlins 2 where they all get sprayed with a hose and the like mini gremlins start popping out of them, which I think is really appropriate. And the bone horn things are really cool, where you've got that kind of like black to ochre to kind of bone color going on. And I like as well how like the main dude's face is very strongly highlighted, and it kind of draws your attention in. It's kind of way that the arm wraps around and how you kind of transitions in the arm to the purple and then up to a lighter purple. That's really cool. And fair play for digging this thing out of the old pile of shame. It's a very daunting model. It's got a lot going on. Yeah, and don't be ever worried about sometimes we have things like this. It's a big, probably expensive kit. It's got so much stuff going on, but it's your model. It's just sitting in a box, not really doing anything for you. Always gonna look better when you painted it. And don't be afraid to like mess around with things. Like, if you were like worried about, obviously you put in a lot of work into the skin of the beast and everything. That was what you were interested in. The two guys up on top, like, you could like put them on the base, or you could place them with dirt, do something else. If you're not super interested in them, it's your model. You can't ruin a model. You can improve it by painting it or converting it or doing whatever you want. Oh, and last shout out, I thought the little eyes that you like free-handed on the back and around his arse are kind of cool and creepy. I don't know if they were like originally pustules or they're meant to be eyes, but it's a really nice little hidden extra touch, which is great on such a big model where it's like a lot of space and a lot of stuff to be explored. So thanks for submitting, Stephen. Good luck in the future. And we're up to Robin Hagblom with this amazing Conan bust thing. Oh, I say Conan. It's in very much in that kind of Rosetta style with the colors. I feel, and it's that kind of very appropriate for like you know what the barbarian figure that we have here. So you said yourself that you have notes about the eyes. Yeah, so you could definitely do with a light in those eyes, make them brighter, and they're slightly wonky. One of them's looking one way more than the other. Strap over the chest. Yeah, I mean, it looks a bit odd that the strap over the chest is not really highlighted, and he has a very strong highlight on his pec. But again, like, can't worry too much about it. On a bus like this. There's so many little like bits and bobs and jangly things that aren't actually that important. So don't break your heart too much on those. Like anyone who looks at this is immediately gonna look at the skin and the face and the way it transitions to shadow and the way his stubble is and be like, this is great. And then the other stuff is kind of ancillary. And you have to think about like, why is that even sculpted on there? Lots of busts would just cut off like above his ridiculously oversized belt and that kind of thing. And then the glare and the shield. Yeah, I think with the shield, you could get away with having that super bright highlight in the middle of the boss part if you also had it like on a few of the spikes kind of radiating upwards, and that would just. But at the moment, it is too high because like it's higher than your highest light on all the other metal around it, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But like as you said, yeah, and I really love the shield altogether. It really reminds me of Raymond Swanland. He's like an artist. He does stuff for D&D and Magic and Warhammer and everything. But he has this real spiky style, and he loves having like cold light from above and this orange from below, and it looks really cool the way you have that like the down. It's not even. It's like a Sky Earth NMM, but it just really sells that idea of the setting where it's like he's in this like desert or very like red scenery around him. I think it looks great, and that sort of super spiky, edgy look to it. It's just really awesome, and it's really like adding your own touch onto what is a flat surface. So great work with that altogether. And a couple of other things I think you can improve on. Be the hair. It's kind of lacking a lot of like luster and highlight to it. It looks like uh, you want to have a crown around there and to get a few things, uh, even though it is black hair. And then the gold NMM on the like pommel of the sword, I don't think it's up to your normal standard, especially on the front view. I think on the back it's a bit better. I think on the front view, probably the highlights and shadows should be reversed. Like the highlight should be in the curved part because that's facing towards the light. Does that make sense? Um, you said about what do you do? How do you deal with the shadow side of busts? And yeah, so it is always problematic when you have that lighting lit from one side, and you're like, what do you do on the far side? And what you want to do generally is have some sort of secondary light. So if you remember, we had that chef bust a while ago, and it had that cool like blue glowing light coming from beneath. Or if for this guy, it makes sense to have like a red light, like he's in some temple and there's a fire. But if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to have like motivated lighting, you can just be like, just go back to your a lighter version or a less intense version of your actual light. Because just imagine there's like a rock beside him or something that's bouncing light back at him. Because you'll notice that like it's naturalistic, and it just means that you can go into your darkest shadow and then back up to like another kind of mid highlight or a weaker highlight that's just coming from the other direction. Because as well, like unless he's not lit by a torch at night, so there's got to be something around like you can probably see my ear even though I'm lit from this side, or like because there's something in this room that's reflecting light. And even if there isn't, you can just fake it. Like if it's for a film, they would put a reflector and put it like over this side of him so that it bounces more light there, so you get like a rim light on the far side. Just because like it does tend to look a bit weird when you view it from the shadow side, and there isn't any like kind of light coming in there. Because in real life, your eyes, even if it is that dark, your eyes readjust to the lighting situation there, and you wouldn't view it as being dark because it looks like his skin actually becomes kind of darker when you just look at that side. But I feel your pain. I've had the same thing, especially with boss, because that directional lighting looks great, and the way you've done it on the skin here is like masterful. Like the way I love how intensely highlighted all the furrows in his face are, and I love the way it transitions to much more of a red ruddy color in your kind of mid-tone that goes out of the shadow, and like the glistening on his lips and everything. Like it's super good work on the skin. Jim?
Yeah, sticking with the skin, great triumph. I thought that his like chest, abs, and arms look a lot smoother. I mean, I get that he's a lot more wrinkled, like in the face, but there's a few of the like creases that just like a little bit too stark, if that makes sense. So this is being hypercritical, by the way, because this is a stunning piece. I should probably have led with that. Sorry. So being hypercritical because you are such a good painter, this is what you get. So nice job fixing that side of his face as well. That was one of the things I had noted down, that sort of shadow tone on that side of his face was off. But I think you've done a really great job of correcting that. So well done there. With the face though, I did think he was trying to pucker up and give me a kiss. Like he looks like he's wearing lipstick to a certain degree. I just think there's a little bit too much redness in the lips. I think where you nailed his like nipple color, so I'd keep it like more in that sort of tone. I just think his lips are just a little bit too plump and delicious for my liking, really, when you're talking about a scaly old weathered warrior like this guy. So yeah, that one stood out a little bit. Strings, yes, just a little bit more separation on it. Bit of cleanliness around these trinkets that he's got wrapped up to himself as well. Again, hyper picky and critical, but that's what you get. And then, yeah, the only other thing I had that Matt hasn't already mentioned was that I thought that the blue and the silver are very, very close to each other. So I think they could contrast a little bit more. So I would either make this like a deeper, more like an ultramarine blue, perhaps, because it's kind of got that grey blue tinge to it that you correctly used in the silver. So I think, like the silver, the steel. I think the steel is more believable. So I honestly think you could just push around some different tones in this, like the actual buckler part of the shield, and leave the trim as it is. I think that would help massively because it's all just kind of blending together as one, and I think you can. I think you can do it. I think you can push the color contrast there and make that stand out better. But overall, yeah, really awesome work, Robin. I'm glad you got it finished, and yeah, please come again. We've missed you since your high elves. Please come back. Right, so John Israel. So a model from the Infinity line. He'd like to improve on this model to make it fit for a competition. As always, thanks for looking. It's a bit of a subjective answer, really, because it depends what sort of competition. Are we going like Golden Demons, Crystal Brushes, or are we going like local hobby stuff? So, and again, even if you created an absolute masterpiece, way above your own ability just for one piece, there could just be that one guy there that just went one step further and takes it. So it's completely subjective. So it's just, don't sweat it too much. I think you've painted this really nicely. So details are picked out really well. Tiny, tiny little transfers that you've used that have gone on really, really nice. And they're not sticking out. The finish on it is brilliant. Really, really matted down. It's nice and smooth. I like the very light weathering that you've done as well. It's all very good. Massive popping sword as well, and the correct use of the same color, I think, on the lights in his armor and his helm as well. So that's all really, really strong. I just thought, despite it being painted really nicely, it's just quite a dull color choice. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be like brown or bronze, to be honest, but there's an awful lot of your dark volume. So I think if you were to like broaden out the highlights and have more than 50% of this area here is dark, and it's very flat dark as well. So I think you just broaden this highlight, or sorry, the mid-tone out and the highlights as well, and just give it a little bit more life, because it's very nicely done, and I like the tones. I just think there's far too much of the dark, and it's robbing your contrast, because between the highest value and the lowest, you've got a good run, but there's just a lot more of the dark stuff than there is of the light, if you get what I mean. So I think you've just done yourself a bit of a disservice, really, because it is very smoothly done, very crisply applied, and a wonderful finish on it. I just think you've got to rework those values, to be honest. Maybe not on this one, but like for next time. And look at the volumetrics of it, because we're not getting shadows where we'd expect to see shadows, and vice versa for highlights. They're not really so for an example, down this leg, if you've got sort of a highlight, this is essentially a cylinder like the back of his calf. So you'd have a highlight running all the way down the back, and because this bit here is sort of flared out, this would collect loads of light in here, but it's kind of shadow, 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 but you've got a highlight at the top of it and the bottom, so it just doesn't read very well. So have a look at like how to do volumetric highlighting and just treat each part of the model as its own shape. You've done it nicely here on this one and on the chest plate, but like the spheres essentially of the shoulders, there's virtually no highlight here at all. So I think that's where it's struggling really is the volumetrics of it, not the contrast of it, just the placement of the volumetrics. Yeah, so I think the gold maybe just a touch too yellow as well. If you knock that back down to ochre and use like a ivory highlight, that would probably sell better. So it's not awful or anything, just it's only a little bit of gold, but yeah, I thought that it's just a little bit too yellow. So yeah, there you go, John. Sorry, that's a bit harsh, but you said competition, so that's what happens. Sorry. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, it's a really nicely painted piece. I like the kind of the color choices that you made, where it's like kind of like Yujing, they're normally orange. This thing is, and it's much darker take on it. And there's loads of little details, like Jim said, with decals and freehands and little bits of NMN tucked away in crevices and stuff, which is really great. But I think at the when you're in a competition, you need to impress from a distance and then impress more when they pick it up. And I think it's so dark that maybe it'd be a shame, like if people, it wasn't until I started looking closely at it that I really appreciated all those things, or that it looked like a bit dull because it's a very dark brown color. I also wasn't 100% sure whether it's supposed to be like a lighter brown and it's at night and then it has like its own light sources on it, because that looks kind of cool, like on the back where you've got like that glowing LED pink thing. But then you've got all these bits of NMM that are really well lit, and like the sword handle and the gun are all lit by some source of light. So it's kind of hard to tell whether is it, and the base is extremely dark as well. So yeah, I would suggest like have a think. Do you want it to be like a dark lighting scenario, or do you want it to be? But even if it is, you need to pick out some details on the base and things, because if it's all kind of dark, people just often think of it as just being painted, unfortunately. But yeah, it's a great looking piece. I really love the way you've done this like pink OSL kind of thing. Great work. Gary Hassani painting some Star Trek guys. I'm going to look at Kirk because he's the one who's in focus. Yeah, I think this is nice. It's pretty well cleanly painted. It's very true to the like colors of what it should be. Like it's obvious that you looked at something and like, okay, this is how Kirk looked in whatever film it was or show. And I love the kind of ruddiness that you've got in the skin, where you got these like nice like red in the cheeks and kind of like colder tones all around his jaw and stuff. It's got a really nice combination of changing color and changing the value to define the face. I think you've got a little bit of an issue in terms of where the hair and skin meet each other. Like on his eyebrow, there's some of the skin color is on the hair, and then some of the looks like whereas like quiff comes down, some of the hair color got in the skin. So what you probably want to do there is tidy that up a bit and then put like a shadow around it, where like his hair is casting a shadow in the skin to define those areas a bit better. The clothes as well, like it's a very flat kind of yellow. You can kind of see the shadows that are in the bust, but it doesn't look like you've done anything to kind of enhance them. And the same with that silver crest. So you either need to kind of like paint in more shadows, optionally highlights, but I'd say shadows for the most part, or you could do something where like the bottom part of his shirt thing is darker, like as if he's casting a shadow or something in front of him, and like that Star Trek logo could have shadowed in at the bottom. I think the hair as well, it's nice. It's fairly like natural looking, but it could have more variety because it looks like you've got pretty much same kind of like shadow and highlights on the sides and the top. Whereas obviously the extreme highlights on the top will always be higher than on the sides. And as well, hair, like it's often you have strands of lighter colored hair up top where it gets like bleached by the sun and things. So just having a few like strands in a lighter color and things just to make it look a bit more natural would be great. I think like the face is quite strong. I like how you picked out like all the little the like anatomy of the face. You've got like that pink tear duct thing in his eyes, and you got a shadow caster in his eyes really well. Um, and the way you kind of like use the hues to show like the blood in his cheeks and everything. It's probably the standout piece for me. Is the skin. Although I would maybe put the lips up a touch redder, and optionally the ears as well. Jim is going to say the ears. I know. Jim.
How did you know? Yes, absolutely. So yeah, a very strong start. It's going a good direction, especially with the skin. But yes, taking it further in a few areas is going to make this pop really quickly. So for me, for anyone really, like one of the first things that you're drawn to, if not the first thing that you're drawn to, is the eyes on a bust, because human brains are just trained that way. When you see a face, you recognize it as a face, you look straight at the eyes. So the cleanliness in the eyes could be a little bit better. So as Matt said, it's great that you've got like these like the tear ducts painted in there. So it would also really help to have a quite a dark line like outlining the sockets, very hyper thin, and just tidying up some of the like the iris color and the pupil, and just getting them really hyper crisp. It takes a long time, yes, but it's definitely worth doing. And it looks as if like your life light, which Matt mentioned in the previous bust, great job for putting it in, but next time put them on the same corner of the iris. So it looks like this one here is top left as we're looking at it, and this eye is obviously top right. So make sure they're always in exactly, or if not very similar place on both eyeballs, because it tells you that the light is coming from that direction. So obviously this one's coming from that way, that one's coming from that way. The eyes never reflect like that. They're always from the same side. So just a note there. Yes, some more shadowy tones and some highlights. I don't think the sculpt of the hair is particularly good, to be honest, especially not on the eyebrows. So you kind of been dealt a bit of a bum deal there, I'd say. But yeah, just some more tones, some more shadows, separation, as Matt said, would really help. And then the only other thing I had really was putting some more shades on the yellow. So yellow is a tricky color, because when it doesn't like change color like when it gets highlighted, if that makes sense. It just gets more yellow. So you have to really work the shadows with yellow to give it the contrast and the pop. So yeah, and there isn't a lot of it to work with. It's going to have to be very subtle to working in the shadows. And you basically just want to take a little bit of very dark grey or blue, very dark blue, and just mix that with the yellow and very thinly play with that to push your shadows around. But yeah, very strong start. Gary, keep going. You've got to paint these things until you're insane, and then do twice as much. I believe that's the quote, isn't it, Matt? So yeah, keep going. Looking good. Cheers, Gary. Okay, up to Sasha now. Open for every advice, general advice. So I really like this, Sasha. This looks like a suitably battered piece of dreadnought armor. So I'm thoroughly enjoying the scheme, like how you've brought the black into the yellow to like break it all up. The little dot colors of red around, use of decals, all very good. So I thought with the amount of weathering that's on the armor, which is really nicely placed round the edges, varying degrees of severity and size, and also directional as well. It's really nice weathering. Like how you put black in with the silver as well to show the like the primer layer beneath the like the lacquer. That's really good. But do it on your decals as well. So these would, you just need to take some of the brown or the yellow, or just sponge it on, or just draw some little lines. Like you did it really nicely with this one over here. This is a forward facing plate that would be beaten up and battered. These decals need to have weathering on them because they're standing out too much. These side ones you've actually done it on, and they look so much better. Just looking for a full side on shot here. That's pretty much the best one. So this one looks so much better than these ones because they're incorporated, they're settled into it. You got it a little bit on the knee as well. I'd take this one further. Use the yellow colour that's beneath it and just use a sponge and just very, very lightly just dab that on there. That will look loads better. So then I noticed that the silver and the black on the gun doesn't really have much shading or highlight to it. So you can pick out these edges. You could paint, again, talking about shapes, volumes. So a cylinder will have like a line running down it. And then the shadow obviously underneath will be nearly black. Same for these things. And those highlight, the light in the photo is actually doing it for you. It's telling you where to put it exactly. So just follow that. These are not been painted on. And again, you can weather these a bit. You can dry brush or stipple some black around the end, maybe, like where it gets hot. That'd be really cool. But yeah, I'm guessing this is for tabletop, and I think it's a really strong piece. I like what you've done with the base as well. Bringing some variety in there, it really sets the scene of where he is. So he's clearly on an alien planet with alien life forms and sludge, and it sells really nice. So yeah, good work on the base. I think that was it. Yeah, that was it. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, super cool use of like weathering and decals and freehand and that kind of thing to make the panels more interesting. I also really like the color choice where it's that kind of yellow that's been grunged up to orange, or it's a orangey yellow, kind of like the t-shirt I'm wearing. But definitely Conan like doesn't look like it's ever been fired, even though his like missile thing is missing half the missiles, and he's like completely like his left arm looks like he's been rubbing against everything. But last Conan looks perfectly pristine. So definitely weather up those silvers, and around his face you can kind of get away with it because you're drawing attention there. But like it's got that Inquisition logo skull. I don't know, it's a skull on a cross, and that's like really solid silver. And similarly, the like red skull with wings is very solid red. So like you could optionally file those off and replace them with other things if you wanted to. But otherwise, you need to do like some weathering or some shading or something to those to make them look as good as the rest of it does. Because like just even his left shoulder pads, that could be like I can imagine like a book for Warhammer that's like the cover of it or whatever piece of art in it. And cool use of the Gene Stealer hive thing that at the bottom that I could never get on any base ever. Good work, Sasha. Next up, got Alexis doing a bust. I don't know if this is the first bust we've seen from Alexis, but anyway. So great to see you kind of pushing yourself on it. It looks very high standards, and busts are a great way to push yourself more because busts just require much more of you. Female busts are harder. Half busts like this are harder again. So it's a bit the most challenging thing you could be doing. So good work. It's extremely smooth and cleanly painted. It looks really good in that regard. I love the use of color, especially in the skin, and the way you've got that kind of simplish, like understated OSL. You can go over the top on it. She's got a bit of OSL on her hand, and the flames look quite good on the arrow. You know, kind of annoys me because technically we should be able to see the arrow through the flames, but you can't paint it that way. But I think it looks like a convincing representation of a flaming arrow, which also aren't a real thing. I actually did that. But anyway, skin tone is really like the standout point for me. Like I really love how you've got like her muscles are well defined, but she doesn't look like it's not like over the top. We don't have that muscle island thing, and you've got it goes into more red tones in the shadows. So you're kind of using kind of color value and color together to find that. I think you've got a real talent for that, or the good eye of like where you want to have interesting colors in your transitions. I think probably her ear could have a bit more color to it because it's an ear and it's really big and it doesn't have the same gamma as other parts of her. And I think the face looks very like powdered. Like you just have like an extreme highlight on the face somewhere because you know you got oils in your skin and it's kind of highline and it refracts light and stuff. So somewhere on her face should have the absolute maximum highlight on there, and she looks like she's being lit like directly into her face as well. So that would be an area I think you could definitely improve on it. Getting into more nitpicky things, I think the hair doesn't look like it's had as much attention paid to it. Really, looks a bit like an afterthought. Especially like on top of her head, it's not super well defined. Blonde hair, very annoying, especially in this kind of sculpt. Again, you're playing with realism, like hair isn't actually that thick. But if you've done the skin this well, you need to do the hair to a similar kind of standard realism things. And as well, some of the NMM doesn't really snap for me. I think like you haven't quite defined the volumes as much. And again, it looks could be photo now, but it looks a bit like you're missing your maximum highlight again on like say like the like breastplate part. You want to have like glint highlights on the edges, and then also have shadows like between every plate, which doesn't seem like it makes that much sense. But even if they're facing up, like you have like an extra strip of metal, so it'll cast a shadow on the piece underneath it. Or there should be like an occlusion shadow just to show that that's two pieces that are sitting on each other rather than like one molded piece. That makes sense. Um, and then yeah, I thought her left arm down like here is very well lit for some reason. Like I'm not sure why you're trying to represent that it's like the OSL and the light combining together, but it's almost brighter than her face. It's a bit strange. I don't know if is it meant to be a bracer or something. That's just something that you could sort out yourself. But again, I think the skin tone itself is like really really pleasant, and overall it's a very nice piece to look at in terms of the details and the big picture. Jim?
Yeah, that stunning work, by the way, Alexis. Really, really nice. But this confused me as well. I wasn't sure if that was part of the armor or whether that was her skin. You can't really tell. Like from the photo, it could be either because this wrist guard is obviously a solid piece. I get that this one's different because it's the string guard, it's the bow guard to stop the bowstring lacerating the inside of the arm. So it would be different. But yeah, if that's supposed to be skin, I think you could bring in some more of like the pink and red tones, which are beautiful, by the way. It just does look a little bit bright. If it is armor, then differentiate it from the skin a little bit more. I think would be great. I think you did a pretty lovely job with the blonde hair. To be honest, I think the picture is blowing out some of the detail like a little bit. So I think if you were to like take this picture again but bring the exposure down, I think it would do some favors for the hair. As Matt said, stunning smoothness and separation and everything all over. It's gorgeous. I can't help but feel like you could have used some floss or something to make a string for it, because it's very obviously not there. And I know it's only a model and it blah blah blah, but that's definitely something that it looks weird. I think it would look better with something there as a string, and I don't think it would be that difficult to do either, to be honest. A couple of bits of floss, soak them in super glue, straighten them out, affix them very gently. Something like that would be cool. Then the other thing, I'm not completely sold that the OSL is needed, because she is very well lit, like high noon. She's lit. Obviously outside because she's shooting a burning arrow. But yeah, I just don't think that this otherwise tiny flame would have this much of an effect over this distance. I mean, the arrow shaft itself is kind of lit, and I'd get it up to about here. I'd believe that would have an effect, but anything this way, I don't think it'd be having that much of an effect at all, to be honest. And I know that's harsh because it's nicely executed, but I don't get why her arm is, this well lit. All of a sudden, this hand is in shadow when there's nothing, considering how far the light has come. Why is it having such an effect here and so much less of an effect here that this tiny light will cast a glow on it? I don't think it's really necessary. If you painted her in like hyper dark light setting in there, that would look absolutely awesome. But I think for her general zenithal lighting, I don't think you need this, to be honest. Not on this one, as nicely as it's done. So yeah, really stunning work overall. Thank you very much for submitting again. Really enjoyed looking at it, Alexis. Thank you. Okay, moving up to Alessandro, trying to push skills further, getting more control on blending with chimera colors. You probably don't need to change your phone. I'll try and explain that a little bit. Black rim only because coloured ones don't work. Just leave it there. Coloured ones don't work. Just no.
Yeah.
Black rim. That's all you need.
Stop.
Never another color.
Mhm.
So,
or just black only. If you just had that black rim only,
yes,
full stop.
correct. Yeah, that's right. No, you won't upset us with the black rim. So with this one, Alessandro, it looks like the camera is overexposed, so you've got like a hyper black background here, and it looks like you've kind of dropped it on there because I don't know what you've done with it, but when you take the picture, I mean, look on YouTube how to photograph miniatures with your phone. It doesn't matter whether it's an iPhone or an Android phone. It really doesn't matter. They work the same way. But it looks like you need to bring the exposure and the brightness down before you take the picture. Don't try and do anything afterwards, and that will help you out enormously. So it looks like the light you had on it was pretty good, and how you've painted this is actually really good. It's just the exposure is blowing it all out. You've got far too much detail in your shadows. So like I actually copied this picture and I put it into some app afterwards and brought it all down, and you could see that the volumes were there, and it was much deeper shadow. Like the effect that you were getting off of the lantern was loads better than what's coming out in these pictures. So this one's better. So I don't think you need a new phone necessarily. You just need to spend a little time watching some videos, some examples of how to do it. So the paint job itself, I think, is actually pretty good. How you've got this whole moonlight setting coming from the back. So it's just needs a little bit more contrast and deeper shadows, like really deep, like down to black. So this is like nearly black, but you can see how black your paint is from the base rim, and these shadows could definitely go further. But what you've done with the highlights, I think is actually quite good. There's a little too much of the extreme highlight going on. You don't need to put it up everywhere. As I said earlier, if you highlight everything, you've highlighted nothing. So it just needs to be the very shiniest stuff, like the metals that are facing directly up would have it. You wouldn't have it on the leather, you wouldn't have it on the cloth, on the helm, or any of those places. It would just be the metal bits that are facing upward. Yeah, that would deserve this really high highlight. Everything else can be highlighted, but just not that bright. And I think your night settings would really sell. And I really like what you've done on the front. I think you've done a good job of blending the armor panels and like where you've put the highlights and stuff. But again, some deeper shadows in some places, like round this, because this sort of chainmail is sort of round shaped like that. So like where the sides are, that would be in deeper shadow, and you'd have a very bright highlight running down the middle, but it needs to be of this yellow. It needs to be sort of, this is kind of a white highlight. It needs to be whatever this lantern is, whatever the colour is you use for that. But really getting there. I really like this. I think this has come a long way from the stuff that we've seen from you before. So really good job. I'll watch out for seams as well, molds when you're sculpting, just a little bit of liquid green stuff or milliput or something, sand it back, and that will really help make this thing pop. So thank you, Alessandro. Hope that helps. Matt?
Yeah, really nice looking piece. Really reminds me of Pathfinder, the game. All the like paladins and that have like kind of brass armor and blue cloaks during this kind of deserty setting, and it's really nice. I think the dark setting is really good. There's this kind of subliminal thing happening because the way you painted your cloak looks kind of like the sky at night, so that like really helps us kind of think like, oh, it's nighttime. But I'm not really feeling that the light is coming from her lantern, and that's because the ground is too well lit. It looks more like she's like in a tomb or something, and she's coming out into the daylight rather than it being nighttime and she's illuminated by her. Because like if you look at the shadow side of her, like under her cloak, like or her left leg, it's like goes to really dark. But then the ground underneath her isn't that dark, and it's more like there's just a nice cast shadow from that stone. But I don't think her lantern would light the area quite like that. It looks more like there is a sunlight coming at her, if that makes sense. But I think that's really successful in that regard, and like trying to get the idea that there's a dark and light side while still having them both look interesting. Like it's really good. But I think if you you had the base overall being darker, like, because obviously it looks like the light has gone through her and like lit the ground behind her, which would happen if it's like a big light source, like the sun or the sky, but not if she's holding it up, because it's like she's going to create this massive shadow because the light source is near to her. If that makes any sense to you. But yeah, really good work. Love the colors. I love that kind of muted, or just the complementary colors that you've used on it. I think it looks really strong. And the face is well defined and everything as well, which is tricky when she's got this big hood. So great work. Keep it up the practice, and keep painting your base rims black. Yeah, you've got this Mike Crawford doing some lady in the moon with a backdrop. It's pretty cool. I think the backdrop is really cool. I really love the way you've done the airbrushed clouds and the moon. It's got that whole thing. I like how the sky is like lighting up around the moon, which is something that often people would leave out, but the sky around the moon is lighter because of like light being diffracted or scattered or whatever by the atmosphere. And I think it really works with the whole, like, she looks like a weird cultist person, and there's this red light that's kind of ominous coming from in front of and below her, and then you have the much colder, wider light coming from the moon, which I think sells quite effectively. She does look quite glossy in places, like see her hip and like boots and stuff, which makes sense in terms of like, okay, that would be glossy there, but it doesn't reflect the lighting scenario that you are telling us about. It's like the gloss parts are lighting up from the lights in your room, if that makes sense. And then as well, I think you have a little bit of an issue. You created an issue for yourself in terms of composition here, because anytime you do this two lights thing, whether it's like the moonlight and firelight or whatever, you want to kind of have them set up so that in the main view, or like preferably in every view, but it's hard to get it in every view, you have mostly one of the lights and then a shadow and then some of the other lights. That makes sense. But the way you've done this is you have the moon directly behind her and you have the light, red light, directly in front of her. And because there's like the backdrops there, we wouldn't actually be able to see it from behind anyway. So like you can kind of tell there isn't. You want to have like a hint of the moonlight in the front of her, like as if, say, for example, obviously the moonlight. You want to have the moon off to one side and the fire off to the other side, so you can kind of see a bit of both in both sides. And I think as well, the way you've done the red OSL is a little bit confused in some places, because you have like the tops of her right thigh or boot or whatever it is lit up red, which suggests that the red light is coming from above, but then everything else is suggesting it's coming from below. So it looks kind of like she's like sandwiched in between, like just a light coming from this way and this way. Whereas you want to set it up a bit more artfully when you think about where you want the lights to play around. Like I think the picture from the side is probably like the best bit, where you've got that moonlight and we have shadow and then we have the red light. But it's just a bit awkward because your frontal view is only lit by one of the lights. If that makes sense. But it's really great to see the backdrop, adding a backdrop and doing this dual lighting effect on what is a pretty complicated model is really great work altogether. And it's great to see you pushing yourself. And I think the OSL, the different lights are working as well. So keep it up. Jim?
Yeah, much the same. Pretty much exactly the same notes, to be honest. But I didn't hear Matt mention it. Like the way you've applied all this delicious tones that you've used, the purples, the whites, the blues, red, orange, yellow. It's all very nicely, smoothly applied. But another thing for the OSL is it's very much the same intensity as up here as it is down here, which is another reason it's struggling to sell a little bit. So as it gets weaker, as it gets further away from the source, it obviously needs to get weaker, and that's not really happening. It's all just the same intensity, blowing all the way up. So I think if you dialed this OSL back to around about the knees and like halfway up the sickle, I think it is, or scepter, or whatever it is that she's carrying, that would probably be enough. And then you could do a little bit more higher up on the chains, because that's metal and it's really reflective. But I wouldn't go as far up as her arm, if that makes sense. And then everything else should be just kind of, you could maybe just a tiny bit on the underneath of her chest armor, like absolute max, but it needs to be nowhere near this bright yellow orange color. It's too strong across the whole range that it's traveled. The moonlit side, this angle particularly though, this is really, really nice. How you can see like that definite shadow between them. Really, really great stuff. All in all, so yeah, hope that helps. Thanks, Mac. Really cool looking model. Okay, Jamie Mackey, late to the party, but we shall forgive you because this is glorious. Original box art and some rough edges, but welcome your views, critique, and helpful feedback. We were chatting about this just before we started recording, and we were like, dude, Matt said, that pretty much is the box art, isn't it? I haven't seen it, to be honest, but if he told me this was the box art, I would believe him. Because this is absolutely delicious. I think there was a black and white photo here that just shows the level of contrast is bang on. Really, really nice travel in all of it. I love the like moody Halloween themed muted tones. Nothing too offensive other than in the lights, but that's where you'd want to see it. So I'm really enjoying all of that. I thought maybe you could push some extreme highlights in. I think that's supposed to be metal. I'm not sure. It kind of looks like corroded metal, like as it is with like the skeletal arms. So just like stippling in or like sponging in just some really, really bright silver would be nice, like on this chest plate and down this central like spinal cord. Because some of the other metals do seem a little bit brighter. You could do the same on these like spears that these weird looking dudes have got. And then the only other thing really was the buttons on the main cape didn't really. So it looks like you've kind of gone for gold, but not quite got it over the line. So that was the like paint application. That's like really the only thing. I think everything else is pretty stunning and beautiful, really. But these buttons were just not quite to the same level of detail. Oh, there's another one there I hadn't spotted. This one actually sells a little bit better. It's kind of got a bit brighter highlight to it, but still I think you could go deeper with the darks and just separate them out a little bit more. But yeah, what you've done with this blade on the floor is absolutely beautiful. Like, brilliant blood pattern. There's a tiny amount on there, but you know, I think anything more and you'd actually steal away from the effect that you're going for. So yeah, like even like the almost like vignette style fading out on the base, really, really nicely done. So yeah, just massive congrats, James. Beautiful once again. Thank you very much. What do you reckon, Matt?
Yeah, not really giving us much to work with here, Jamie. This thing is like gorgeous. I mean, like it's a really complicated piece, and I think you just nailed it. I love the colors. I love contrast. I love like, and it's cluttered, so it could be easy to like mess things up. But it really like we can tell the story where it's like, oh, these two lovers, and there's a puppeteer, and he made him kill her, and then there's like this kind of religious iconography on one side, and then other people looking on. It's like puppet Romeo and Juliet or something. So yeah, I had to use my little fingers and like zoom in to look for things to complain about, but you know that's like, because yeah, it looks so great. And like, so a few things. I thought the hair on the main dude was a little bit like, it's a little bit like roots or something. Like the it's either too scratchy. Like you could either do it scratchier to make it look real frazzled and everything, or just get a few more smoother kind of flowing lines in there. Because the actual volume of the strands of hair look like they have sharp edges on it, which is weird. But like, or you could lean into that to make it more clear. I think the main puppeteer's face could probably just have a little bit more highlight on the brow to be like the ultimate kind of highlight, and then his eyes as well. They're not really looking like OSL way this little demon dude's is, because it might be just the angle in the photos, but it doesn't look like he has the kind of like shadow under here and then back up to highlight to show that the light's coming from inside of his mask. And then hair on the little lady down here, it's like a super minor thing, but I just think like the way you placed like some of the highlights on the strand that's leading out doesn't necessarily make that much sense with how it follows the kind of doesn't follow the length of the strand of hair. It's like I think you were thinking about the spotlight effect, but it'll still like fade out, whereas you just got kind of like a blotch of highlight kind of near to where the knife is. And yeah, like I just love all the tones and everything. And the NMM, yeah, for me, I like that there's kind of like a variety to it, and it looks kind of like stylized in places. Like the pumpkin dude with the pin sticking out of his back. That's much like less contrast on it, but it still reads as metal, but it looks more like how metal is like illustrated in like pictures and things rather than what this super high contrast NMM that we're used to in miniature painting. And as a kind of aside, you could do something like, I thought it might be cool if the guy who's crying, the puppety guy, like if his, you could do like his face was like cracking up, or add in some extra detail, like that he's got a jack-o'-lantern face under there, that it's like, and that would kind of add to the story where he's like breaking under the pressure of what he's done. But I mean, there's so much going on here, and it's got such lovely tones in like purple and green and the coolness of everything. Like it's super high end stuff, Jamie. Thank you a lot for submitting, and it's been our pleasure. Hopefully that's something useful for you. Can't wait to see more work from you in the future. Okay, and up next we have another extremely well painted piece here. Looking for Tuck, a silver in the Nova Open last month. Congratulations, very good. This is Mike Kaufman. Looking for feedback from a competition point of view. So again, we're going to be real hard on you, but try not to take that too badly. Like, there's so much gone right with this piece. Like everything on it looks amazing. So we're just gonna, we can only kind of like talk about the sticky quibbles. It's extremely well rendered. It's great color scheme on the chains. In some places, it's hard to tell whether it's NMM or TMM, which is exactly what you want. And like it's, I can understand why it won silver place in a big competition like that. So congratulations on all that. So talking about what you might do to get gold, apart from, you know, sabotaging the other entrance, which is our default answer. So I thought that from the rear view, it looks like everything's not a little bit less high standard, especially on the kind of gold on his backpack, and the haft of his axe doesn't have, it's the same metallic sheen as in other places. And then the axe head as well, it doesn't look like, just the way you've done the lights and shadows doesn't have that NMM red kind of to it. It's not selling quite as well as it in the armor. Understandable because it's like a lot, but again, for a competition, if we were looking at another piece, comparing this to something that was equally well painted from front, we turn around and be like, okay, that might be like a black mark against you. And even for such a minor thing, I thought the chains, the way they're wrapping around his arm, like the links and everything look good and well painted, but there's no like overall highlight that goes across them, if you get me, because you can kind of think of that ream of chains as being one cylindrical volume. So like the links in the middle at the top will have the maximum highlight, and it'll kind of like go from 1 to 1. That'd be like just to kick that off a little bit more. And as well, again, for a competition, you want to have some extra little details. Like this guy, every facet of him is super well painted, but there's not a lot of sort of extra little story for us to find to like say the difference between, you know, gold, silver, bronze kind of thing. Like if you had like some sort of verdigris in a couple of little places on the gold / bronze, like one of the skulls in his backpack is like weeping green goo or whatever, and if his knuckles on his hand were like battered up, like punching people all day and night, that'd be an extra little detail that'd give it like that little bit more to get it over the line. And as well, in terms of sort of competition strategy, he's on a very, very big base, and the base doesn't really feel like it's painted to quite the same standard as the rest of it. It seems like it's in quite a different style, even the way you've done like the red metal in there things. So I wondered like, why did it have to be a diorama base? Like, could you have just made it be the rock, and then you'd have less stuff to worry about, and you'd have more time to do other stuff? Like, it's still well painted, but it just doesn't look like as finely executed as the figure itself. And be careful as well with the like that snow effect. I always have that problem where it's like crystal powder, and it's kind of hard to work with, and it's hard to say like when snow is falling, like will it stick more in a raised area or more in a shallow area? It can kind of depend on the weather, that kind of thing. So again, if you're going into a competition, you might want to go for a basing scheme that's more straightforward, and you know you can like nail it. Just because again, when you get to the stage where we have another extremely well painted figure, and then if they're on a base that's also like painted up to like 110%, that's going to edge them that little bit over you. Whereas, you know, if you had a smaller base, it would be easier for you to bring it up to the maximum that you can do here. Because this is like super amazingly well painted. It looks like so huge for what I know is a small figure. So congratulations on a well deserved silver there. Jim, do you have anything you want to add?
Not a great deal. I saw all the whips of this going up in the various groups, and it was a joy to watch it come along. And finally seeing it finished and in front of us here is quite a privilege, really, Mike. So thank you for dropping it in. It is bloody lovely, as Matt said many, many times. Really, really strong piece. I agree with him about not taking the whole thing to the same level, like on the back and on the base. Very much agree with that. And then a couple of missed opportunities. I thought, as Matt said, like you could do something with his knuckles to make him look a bit bashed, but on his unarmored arm, there's you've got the veins and you've got these pipes and stuff that's sticking out, and you've defined them with black. And I thought that would be a really cool opportunity to bring some bruising into this. So make it a little bit red, goes in towards purple, and just make it a bit more sort of blotchy around where the pipe is in the skin. That would be quite cool. But I think generally where you are, with your light placement and your NMM and your smoothness, like the plasma glow and stuff, it's all really, really strong. So for going to the next level at competition, it's just a case of firstly sabotage the other guy, and secondly got to take everything to the same level, 110%. And then the only other thing I noticed was maybe I know I could see lots of tones in the rock, but I feel like there could be more, like in the main one. And it also looks like there's some sort of reflection going on with the red, underneath of it, and it's not quite landing, I think, because this isn't as vibrant as this red. I think if that was as bright, I get that you're muting it so you don't steal any attention from what's going on up here, but I'd either dial this effect down or make this brighter. I mean, this red over here is just as bright as what's up here, and I don't see it much of an issue, to be honest. So yeah, it just, this level of brightness I don't think quite goes hand in hand with the effect that it's having on that stone. Other colours ideas, by the way, for stone would be green and purple, blue, just in the shady areas. Green bits where water collect and run down. I mean, look at rocks in nature. It's easy, especially considering this is a wet area as well. So you'd think that it'd maybe stay reasonably wet at times, and you'd get that algae grow up. But yeah, the smoothness and the gold, stunning, volumetrics, amazing, very, 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 very nice. I think the barrel is drilled. I would definitely call you out if the barrel's not been drilled, but it looks like it has. Just about. Let's have a look. Yeah, I'll buy it. I think that's been drilled out. So yeah, good stuff. Really, really strong, Mark. Thank you for sending it over. Looks awesome. Nice one. And that brings us to the end, doesn't it?
So indeed, it was a great month. Thanks to everyone for submitting.
Awesome stuff.
And you've watched through the end of the video. Thanks a million. Leave a comment if you think we're doing a good job, or if you think we're doing a bad job. I'm open to any feedback. And if you enjoyed this and you're not in Painters Motivating Painters, just check it out on Facebook. It's a great group full of wonderful people who are really interested in helping each other up their miniature painting game to the next level. We'll see you next month.